The Hatton Garden Heist of 2015. Picture this. It's Easter weekend, 2015. The streets of London are unusually quiet. Businesses are shuttered. Families are sitting down to roast dinners. Pubs are already filling up with people, 3 days deep into a long bank holiday. And deep beneath one of the most famous jewelry districts in the world, Hatton Garden, EC1, a group of elderly men are drilling through half a metre of reinforced concrete to steal 14 million pounds worth of diamonds, gold, cash, and jewels. That's right, not a crew of athletic 20-somethings, fresh off a mission. Impossible marathon, not a team of ex-military operatives with earpieces and tactical vests. We are talking about a gang of pensioners, men whose combined age totaled 442 years, the youngest in their late 50s, the oldest pushing 80, men who between them had more combined criminal convictions than most people have had hot dinners. Men who had done hard time, escaped from prison, laundered gold bullion from one of Britain's most infamous heists, and now, in their twilight years, decided to go out with one final, glorious score. This is the story of the Hatton Garden safe deposit heist, officially the largest burglary in English, legal history, and it is every bit as extraordinary, as human, and as darkly comic as it sounds. This isn't just a crime story. It's a story about old men refusing to fade quietly into retirement. It's a story about loyalty and betrayal, about planning and improvisation, about the gap between analog criminals and the digital world they no longer understood. So settle in, because this one has everything. A diamond in the heart of London. To understand why this heist was so audacious, you first need to understand the target and the neighborhood around it. Hatton Garden stands as a historic symbol of the UK's diamond and jewellery trade. Dating back to the 1700s and named after Sir Christopher Hatton, it evolved from a residential zone into a thriving commercial hub, attracting a plethora of jewelers and craftsmen. Over 3 centuries, it became the beating heart of British jewellery, the place where engagement rings were designed, where rough diamonds were cut, where fortunes were traded in handshakes over coffee. The family-owned vault in the basement of the building had been used by jewelers since the 1940s to store gold, precious stones, and cash. For decades, the traders of Hatton Garden trusted this facility with everything. Not just expensive things, everything. Wedding rings passed down through generations. Gold bars purchased over a lifetime of trading. Cash that, for various reasons, tax, divorces, the complications of life, people preferred not to keep in a bank. The vault held secrets as much as it held jewels. The safe deposit facility housed an extensive collection of jewels, gold, cash, and precious stones held by the area's many traders. The facility had 999 safe deposit boxes in total, each one a small steel rectangle, each one representing somebody's most precious things. And on a quiet Easter weekend in April 2015, 73 of those boxes would be ripped open by a group of old men with crowbars, angle grinders, and absolutely no intention of stopping. It was, on paper, impenetrable. The walls were thick reinforced concrete. There was a state-of-the-art alarm system. There were CCTV cameras inside and outside the building. There was no obvious way in, and that was the point. But these men had a plan, and they'd been working on it for nearly 3 years. The fire. A curious coincidence before we even get to the heist itself. We need to talk about something that has never been definitively explained and has kept conspiracy theorists busy ever since. On the 1st of April 2015, just one day before the gang made their first move, electrical cables under the pavement in Kingsway caught fire, leading to serious disruption in central London.
Ow.
The fire continued for the next 2 days, with flames shooting out of a manhole cover from a burst gas main before being extinguished. Several thousand people were evacuated from nearby offices. Local residents were left without food and electricity, and several West End theaters canceled performances. There was also substantial disruption to telecoms infrastructure. This fire was approximately 500 yards from the Hatton Garden Vault. Chaos reigned across central London. Road closures, emergency services stretched, massive power outages. And in the middle of all of that, a group of men disguised as workmen start unloading equipment outside a safe deposit facility. Before the robbery actually took place, There are suspicions that the criminals deliberately started a fire at nearby Holborn. The fact that the fire was started in the week before the attack and took hold only 500 yards from the vault whilst causing major power outages and chaos does seem to be more than just a coincidence. The London Fire Brigade later stated that the fire had been caused by an electrical fault with no sign of arson. And yet, fire erupts, causes widespread chaos and power disruption, less than 500 yards from a vault that's about to be robbed, just one day before the robbery begins. The criminal world, timing is everything. Whether or not the gang started that fire, and the evidence says they didn't, it couldn't have been more convenient if they'd ordered it on next-day delivery. With the fire raging in central London, any men unloading tools and equipment from a van could simply appear to be doing maintenance to make sure the fire didn't spread. The cover was perfect, the stage was set, and on the evening of Thursday, April 2nd, the curtain went up. Who were these men? When news broke, there was a frenzy of speculation over who could have been behind such an audacious break-in. Some believed it was the infamous Pink Panthers criminal network from the Balkans. Others wondered if a group of elite thieves who were strangers to each other had been gathered together by a criminal mastermind. But then came the gobsmacking truth. Let's meet them properly, every single one, because each man's story is a story in itself. Brian Reeder, the master, the governor, age at time of heist, 76. The oldest member of the group, age 77 at the time of his sentencing. Brian Reeder became the face of the Hatton Garden heist, played by Sir Michael Caine and Larry Lamb in the various film adaptations. While Reeder was known as a mild-mannered, unassuming sort of man, he was deeply entrenched in the criminal underworld and had previously done time for handling stolen goods relating to the notorious Brinksmat gold bullion robbery in 1983. Let's pause on Brinksmat for a moment, because this matters. In November 1983, 6 armed robbers raided a warehouse at Heathrow Airport, expecting to find a few million in cash. What they found instead were 6,800 gold bars, diamonds, and travelers' checks worth £26 million. It was, at the time, one of the most sensational robberies in British history, and its aftermath was even more extraordinary. The gold was melted down, smelted, mixed into jewellery, filtered through dodgy businesses and criminal networks across Britain. The 1983 Brinksmat robbery left in its wake a long trail of reprisal killings that spanned decades. Anyone who was connected to the £26 million heist met a violent end. Reeder had survived all of that. He'd been careful, precise, quiet. He kept his head down. He appeared to the outside world like a retired grandfather. But inside he remained what he'd always been, a serious, calculating criminal with an eye for opportunity. Brian Reeder made his way to Hatton Garden on the bus, using someone else's Oyster card. Think about that. This man was about to help orchestrate the largest burglary in British legal history, and he took the bus. Not a cab, not a rented car, the bus. On someone else's travel card. Caution was almost obsessive, and in a different team, it might have saved him. His nickname among the crew was the Goov, or the Master, a mark of respect from men who were themselves experienced, serious criminals. He assembled the crew, set the plan. He was the gravitational center of everything. John Kenny Collins, the lookout, the reconnaissance. Man age at time of heist. 74. Kenny Collins might not have gone inside the vault, but don't underestimate his role. Collins was described in court as instrumental in gaining access to the vault, visiting the area many times to assess its weaknesses. Also purchased the extra equipment needed to drill through the wall of the vault. Collins was, in many ways, the operational backbone of the pre-heist intelligence. He did the legwork. He walked the streets, clocked the camera positions, timed the security rotations, and worked out the building's rhythms. He was the kind of criminal who understood that preparation was everything. Some of the gold stolen from the London heist was even hidden in his wheelie bins. And he also recruited his nephew William Lincoln as a getaway driver and may have recruited Hugh Doyle to the criminal enterprise. But Collins also carried the seed of the gang's destruction on the night of the heist. He drove his personal car, a white E200 series Mercedes with a black roof and black alloy wheels, to the scene. When police reviewed 150 CCTV cameras after the raid, that distinctive vehicle stood out immediately. By running the number plate through London's congestion charge database, they were led to the home of John Kenny Collins, A £14 million heist, undone, at least in part, by the congestion charge. It appeared that the rest of the gang didn't think much of Collins' criminal ability, referring to him as a wombat-thick individual who lost the plot in the weeks after the heist, and on the night itself. Collins remained in the van all night, and according to Danny Jones, fell asleep on the job. Fell asleep on a £14 million heist. Truly extraordinary. Terry Perkins, the veteran, the birthday boy. Age at time of heist, 67. If any single member of this gang embodies the sheer, bloody-minded stubbornness of their enterprise, it is Terry Perkins. Terry Perkins celebrated his 67th birthday during the Hatton Garden raid. Exactly 32 years after he'd taken part in another gigantic Easter raid, the £6 million armed robbery of a London security depot. Perkins was handed a 22-year jail sentence for that one, but absconded from open prison in 1995 and managed to evade recapture until 2012. He escaped from prison and lived for 17 years as a free man, evading capture, before being rearrested in 2012. He served the rest of his sentence and was released just in time for Hatton Garden. And the fact that Hatton Garden also happened on Easter weekend, his birthday, exactly 32 years later, the man was either deeply superstitious or had a wicked sense of criminal poetry. Despite suffering heart problems and diabetes, Perkins was an enthusiastic member of the Hatton Garden gang. With police recording him boasting, "If we get nicked, at least we can hold our heads up that we had a last go. The last fling? The police had bugged his car blue." Citroen Saxo and recorded him saying he planned to use his share of the spoils to fund his pension. His pension. He drilled through half a metre of reinforced concrete on his 67th birthday so he could retire comfortably. If that isn't the most British criminal sentence ever uttered, I genuinely don't know what is. Perkins was also the one caught on camera by undercover officers in a pub 1 month after the heist. Footage shot by undercover officers clearly shows Perkins demonstrating how he breached the vault wall with a diamond-tipped drill. He was essentially doing show-on-tell for his mates. In a pub, with police watching. The detective constable who reviewed the footage later said these recordings were tantamount to a confession. Danny Jones, the eccentric, the vault crawler. Age at time of heist, 58. Danny Jones is, without question, the most colorful character in this entire story. Danny Jones was known as one of the more eccentric villains in the London underworld. According to one court testimony, Jones would go to bed in his mother's dressing gown with a fez on, and had a penchant for having human conversations with his dog. A fez, a dressing gown, conversations with a dog. This man was simultaneously a hardened career criminal with decades of form and the most peculiar person Jones also had an extensive criminal record, including a 1982 conviction for a jewellery robbery valued at almost £100,000. He was physically one of the most active members of the gang, one of the men who actually squeezed through the drill hole into the vault, and began prying open boxes with his own hands. After the heist, Jones did something that defied belief. One of the men behind the Hatton Garden heist claimed a member of the public could stumble across his share of the £20 million haul. In a letter to Sky News crime correspondent Martin Brunt, he said he feared that if the police did not hurry up, anyone could find it, raising the prospect of a treasure hunt. He then agreed to lead police to the hidden stash. An armed convoy with a police helicopter flying overhead took Danny Jones from Belmarsh Prison to a cemetery at midday on Thursday. He was escorted, under heavy guard, to Edmonton Cemetery in North London. And when he got there, he only showed them a small portion of his stash and lied under direct questioning when asked if he knew about any more loot. He took police, under helicopter escort, to a cemetery and still only gave them a fraction of what was there. The cheek of the man was absolutely breathtaking. Later, after the sentences were handed down, Jones also claimed something incendiary about Basil, the mysterious ghost of the operation. In a letter sent from prison, Jones told Sky News more details about his missing accomplice. "I can say that someone told me he was an ex-policeman who got into security by the guy who introduced him to me. He said Basil heard about me from a close friend on the police force as I was arrested for a similar raid in Bond Street in 2010. Basil was the brains, as I was recruited by him. He let me in on the night of the burglary. He hid keys and codes throughout the building. An ex-policeman. the brains of one of Britain's greatest heists, potentially a former officer of the law. Police have never confirmed or denied this allegation, but it adds one more extraordinary layer to an already extraordinary story. Carl Wood, the one who pulled out age at time of heist. 58. Carl Wood's story is interesting precisely because of what he didn't do. Two of the Hatton Garden burglars actually pulled out of the raid halfway through, for fear of being caught. One was the ringleader Brian Reeder, and the other was a more junior member of the team. Carl Wood. Wood was a veteran villain who'd done time in the early 2000s for conspiring with corrupt coppers to kidnap and assault a money launderer. However, by the time of Hatton Garden, Wood was on disability benefits and mired in debt. Disability benefits and mounting debt, and he walked away from the heist before the vault was even breached, which means he got neither the money nor the satisfaction. Wood's friend Jones subsequently refused to give him any of the spoils to help clear his debts, and no loot was found at his house. He still got 6 years in prison. Arguably the worst outcome of anyone involved. No money, no escape, just the sentence. William Billy the Fish Lincoln, the getaway driver. Age at time of heist. 60. William Lincoln earned his nickname from his regular trips to Billingsgate Fish Market on Fridays, a detail so magnificently mundane, it almost makes you love the man. Lincoln was brought in as a getaway driver, recruited as Kenny Collins' nephew. His role was logistical, moving people, moving equipment, being ready at the wheel when it mattered. Lincoln was arrested on May 19, 2015. While driving his black Audi A3, the arresting officers found a torn-up handwritten note on the floor beside him. The writing on the note gave the address of the Wheatsheaf pub where some of the loot was handled, torn up, on the floor, right next to him during an arrest. He was given 7 years. Michael Basilseed, the ghost, the brain's age, unknown, and then there was Basil, the man who walked them in, the man who disabled the alarms, not the man who vanished. On the evening of April 2, 2015, 5 men emerged from a white van in front of the Hatton Garden safe deposit. They were met by a mysterious red-haired man who led them inside. Cameras caught him, but no one knew who he was. While the rest of the gang was identified, arrested, and facing trial, Basil simply didn't exist, at least not in any database the police could connect to that red-haired figure on the CCTV. Michael Seed, an electronics expert, is thought to have disabled the Hatton Garden facility's security system. He is described across multiple accounts as the technical mastermind, the man who understood the infrastructure from the inside out, who had somehow obtained access codes, keys, and the knowledge of exactly where everything vulnerable was. For 3 years he was a ghost. While his former crewmates aged in prison cells, Basil walked free. Michael Seed, nicknamed Basil and described as the brains of the operation, was eventually arrested at his home in Islington in 2018, and in March 2019 was convicted of conspiracy to commit burglary and conspiracy to convert or transfer criminal property, receiving a 10-year prison sentence. In 2022, he was handed an additional 6.5 years for not paying back the confiscation order. The ghost was caught. The clock on his freedom started running backwards. Hugh Doyle, the peripheral player, age at time of heist, 48. Hugh Doyle never went to Hatton Garden. He was in the legal sense the furthest removed from the actual crime. But he was not innocent. Hugh Doyle was a plumbing engineer who was found guilty of conspiracy to conceal, convert, or transfer criminal property. There was no evidence he ever went to Hatton Garden. His role was to provide an exchange point for the final handover of loot outside his business premises. Although Doyle claimed to know nothing of the robbery, it was he who gave Kenny Collins a key to the robbery scene to let himself in and make coffee. A key for coffee, inside a building that was being used as a criminal staging ground. The jury didn't buy the ignorance defense, and neither would you. He received a 21-month suspended sentence, the lightest punishment of anyone connected to the heist. John Harbinson, the acquitted, age at time of heist, 42. One man walked away free. John Harbinson was arrested in the initial sweep and charged, but he was released when his partner was able to show 15-year-old photos of a family member wearing the alleged stolen jewelry. He was found not guilty and discharged. The one who got away not through cunning or planning, but through the simple, pure luck of being able to prove a piece of jewelry wasn't stolen. The heist didn't happen overnight. So it wasn't improvised in a back room. It had been 3 years in the making. planned during regular meetings at the Castle Pub on Pentonville Road in Islington, North London. Long before what happened during 2 different nights in early April, these defendants met frequently, very often on a Friday. To discuss how the burglary was to be successfully carried out, Prosecutor Evans told the court, "Every Friday, for nearly 3 years, a group of elderly men in a North London pub, over pints, mapping out the most audacious robbery Britain would ever see. They didn't use burner phones. They didn't encrypt their messages. They talked in pubs, made notes on bits of paper, and used the knowledge that was already stored in their heads after decades in the criminal trade. They were, as police would later note, entirely analog in their methods, which is precisely what made them hard to detect in the first stage. No digital footprint, no emails, no texts. Just old men talking in a pub. The reconnaissance was extensive and methodical. The biggest burglary in English history involved several reconnaissance missions, one of the gang actually. Entered the building in March 2015 and was later seen tampering with the lift on CCTV. They were scouting the target, learning its rhythms, understanding how the lift shaft connected to the basement. Police believe it wasn't an inside job. It was simply expertly planned. They chose Easter weekend with laser precision. This robbery took place over Easter weekend in April, which is a long bank holiday weekend, a 5-day holiday in the UK. All the businesses would have closed for 4 or 5 days. 4 to 5 days of silence, empty streets, skeleton security. It was the perfect window. And they prepared for the physical challenge, too. The men researched drilling videos on YouTube. When police later raided Danny Jones' house, he found in one of the most delightful details of the entire case a copy of Forensics for Dummies. Forensics for Dummies, self-help guide to not leaving evidence. A career criminal in his late 50s, reading a book with 4 dummies in the title to prepare for a £14 million heist? They were serious about leaving no trace, and remarkably, the gang left no forensic evidence inside the vault. The white fabric gloves they wore, the careful way they carried themselves, all of it was designed to ensure that if the police ever got to the vault, they'd find damaged boxes and rubble, but not a single fingerprint, not a strand of hair. Professional to the end. Night 1, Thursday the 2nd of April 2015, at 21:19, depository staff locked the doors for the Easter weekend. 4 minutes later, the first figure appeared. At 21:23, Mr. Ginger Basil descended to the vault, followed by 3 men pulling wheelie bins. Wheelie bins. The most mundane object in the world. The kind of thing you roll out every Tuesday without a second thought. And here they were, being wheeled into the basement of a secure vault, about to be filled with millions of pounds worth of stolen treasure. The looters posed as gas repairmen, complete with high-visibility vests and hard hats, which not only made them look innocuous, but also helped to conceal their identities from the countless security cameras in the area. To anyone who might have glanced at the CCTV feeds in real time, this looked like a maintenance crew doing weekend work. Nothing alarming, nothing suspicious. Using some form of key, the men were able to access the premises. But they didn't directly go underground where the deposits were stored. Instead, they sent the lift up to where they were and disabled it. Then, they used the vacant lift shaft to shimmy down to the basement. They also used this method to get the heavy equipment down to where they needed it. And then they started drilling. It is estimated the gang took over 4 hours of constant drilling to make the 3 holes, which allowed them to squeeze into the vault. 4 hours. 4 hours of industrial noise drilling through 50 centimeters of reinforced concrete. The Hilti DD350 is not a quiet machine, it's an industrial piece of kit used in construction and demolition, designed to core through the hardest materials. In the silence of Easter Thursday night, in a basement underneath a Hatton garden building, the noise must have been extraordinary. And then the alarm went off. Scotland Yard released a statement about the missed alarm. "We have established that on Friday, the 3rd of April at 0:21 hours, a call was received at the MPS Central Communications Command from Southern Monitoring Alarm Company. The call stated that a confirmed intruder alarm had been activated at the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Limited. The call was recorded and transferred to the police's CAD computer-aided dispatch system. The call was received. It was logged. And then nothing happened. The Metropolitan Police later acknowledged that its initial response to an intruder alarm triggered by the thieves at the Safe Deposit Company had been lacking, and said it was working to improve its systems. Lacking is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. The heist was almost scuppered altogether when the gang members forced open a metal shutter before Basil had disabled the alarms. A text message was sent to the business's owner, and a security guard turned up, but he never entered the building and had no idea of the raid happening beneath his feet. The company owner had been alerted reportedly because an insect had previously triggered the same sensor. Leaving him dismissive of the alarm, a security guard physically came to the building, stood outside it, and left. The police were alerted but didn't go to Hatton Garden that day. Beneath that security guard's feet, several meters underground, men were drilling through a vault wall. He came, he looked at the front of the building, he left, and the drilling continued. But not for long. The night ended in frustration. Having gained access to the building on the first night, jack and hydraulic ram the gang planned to use to knock over the securely fitted deposit boxes didn't work. The equipment failed, the plan stalled, and Brian Reeder, the governor himself, made his call. He walked out. Brian Reeder, despite being referred to as the master or the Goov by his co-conspirators, bottled it, walking out and refusing to go through with the crime. Collins would later blame Reeder for abandoning the gang after the failed first night. Telling a newspaper, "Common sense said we got to go back and give it another half hour," but he pulled out of it. Maybe if he didn't, none of us would have gotten nicked. Reeder saw the failed equipment, heard the alarm, felt the pressure of age and ill health, and made the rational decision that a 76-year-old man with prostate cancer should probably not be committing industrial burglaries in basement vaults at midnight. The rest of the crew disagreed. Night 2, Saturday the 4th of April 2015, they didn't stay away long. The rest of the team went to find new equipment bought under the name V. Jones in reference to footballer-turned-screen gangster Vinnie Jones, and returned later that evening, still undetected, to carry out the heist. They bought replacement kit, a new pump, a new hose for the drill, under a pseudonym chosen as a joke. They were making Vinnie Jones references while preparing to rob a vault. The audacity, the humor, the complete lack of visible stress. Michael Seed, Daniel Jones, and Terry Perkins went back to Hatton Garden, equipped with new equipment. As they shimmied back down the lift shaft, they left Kenny Collins as lookout once again. Down the shaft they went. Again, the gang took over 4 hours of constant drilling to make the 3 holes, which allowed them to squeeze in to the vault. 3 holes. Not 1. 3. Bored through 50 centimeters of reinforced concrete. They clambered through a tiny 45 centimeters wide hole to finally get into the vault. 45 centimeters. That is less than half a meter wide. These were men in their 60s and 70s, squeezing through a hole the width of a large pizza, into a basement vault in the middle of the night. Physical commitment alone is staggering. One by one, 2 of the men squeezed through the hole they'd drilled, began prying open box after box, ransacking anything they could get their hands on. From there, they passed their bags of ill-gotten gains to the third man on the other side. His job was to empty the bags into the wheelie bins that had been brought down the night before. Box after box, the sound of metal being forced. The scratch and clatter of crowbars. All around them, diamonds, gold bars, bundles of cash, platinum, sapphires, emeralds. A lifetime of Hatton Gardens traders, concentrated into steel boxes in a basement. The thieves emptied 73 out of 999 safe deposit boxes, making off with an estimated £14 million worth of cash, jewelry, and other valuable items. They left 73 boxes emptied and 926 untouched. Not because they ran out of desire, but because they ran out of time. At some point in the early morning of Sunday, April 5th, the decision was made. Enough. Between 6:10 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. on April 5th, the burglars took their wheelie bins to Kenny Collins and the waiting van and left. They wheeled millions of pounds worth of stolen goods out of a building, loaded them into a van, and drove away into the London dawn. The vault was covered in debris, and the floor was strewn with discarded safe deposit boxes and numerous power tools, including an angle grinder, concrete drills, and crowbars. They left behind a scene of complete devastation and not a single fingerprint. The discovery. Tuesday morning, for the rest of Easter weekend, the building sat silent. Nobody went in. Nobody noticed. The vault lay open and ransacked. The boxes of generations of jewelry traders scattered across a debris-strewn floor. The break-in wasn't discovered until Tuesday morning when Hatton Garden Safety deposit workers discovered the pile of rubble and damaged security boxes in the basement of their building and called the police. Tuesday, 3 days after the gang had walked out with wheelie bins full of diamonds, they'd had 72 hours of clean air between the crime and its discovery. Scotland Yard learned that a burglary had taken place on the 7th of April. Police arrived to find the vault that was supposed to be impenetrable had been casually walked into, drilled through, and emptied. The Daily Mirror released CCTV footage on the 10th of April, and suddenly, the story was everywhere. London's newspapers went into overdrive. This wasn't a smosh and grab. This wasn't a mugging or a bank job with a waved gun. This was something else entirely. Months of planning, industrial equipment, a perfectly chosen window of opportunity. Executed by people who clearly knew what they were doing. The question on everyone's lips: who could have done this? The victims. Before we talk about the investigation, we need to stop and acknowledge the people that the press coverage so often glossed over: the actual victims. Victims of the Easter Hatton Garden heist had their lives ruined, with many left struggling to recover losses. Rick Marchant, a loss adjuster, said he was dealing with 7 clients who had lost items worth up to £2 million. He said many of the victims were small businesses that were not making huge profits. These aren't extremely wealthy people. For a lot of them, their livelihoods have gone. All of us might be forgiven for thinking how audacious, how clever, but what the gang has done is ruin the lives of many people within the Hatton Garden jewelry quarter. Hardened dealers were said to be in sobs after the heist, with some having no insurance at all. Their view was, it is in a safety deposit box. The key word is safety. It should be okay. And of course they have lost everything, said Marchant. No insurance, because who insures something they believe is in an impenetrable safe? Many of them were local jewelers whose goods were uninsured. A spokesperson for the British Insurance Brokers Association surmised that the victims could be left millions of pounds out of pocket. And among those victims, Premier League footballers were among those who had valuables stolen in the heist. But the majority were not wealthy celebrities. They were small traders, craftspeople, families who had trusted a safe deposit box with things that could never be replaced. Not just financially, but personally. Heirlooms, irreplaceable jewelry. The rings and stones and gold that carried the memory of people no longer living. The gang never expressed meaningful remorse for any of this. The investigation. The theft was so significant that the investigation was assigned to the Flying Squad, a branch of the Specialist, Organised and Economic Crime Command within London's Metropolitan Police Service. The Flying Squad. Formed in 1919, this is the unit built specifically to hunt down serious organized crime, armed robbers, major heists, professional criminal networks. They have been called the most famous crime-fighting unit in the world. If they were sent after you, you had done something seriously significant. The investigation moved fast. Police reviewed footage from 150 CCTV cameras after the raid and spotted Collins' distinctive Mercedes almost immediately. From that car, they traced Collins. From Collins, they traced Perkins, Reeder, and Jones. But they didn't immediately move in. Instead, they did something brilliantly patient. They planted bugs. The Mercedes and another vehicle owned by Terry Perkins were bugged by police soon after the raid, and officers were then able to listen in to the conversations of the conspirators. The police were now on the trail and able to watch the rest of the gang as they talked about what went wrong during the heist, discussed how and where they would divide the loot, and indulged in a good deal of matey banter. What did the police hear? They heard Perkins demonstrating his drilling technique to his mates in a pub. They heard Jones complaining about the noise of the pump with a headache mid-heist. It was hissing, that pump. Bang, didn't it? That's all I could hear, bang. And I thought, for F***'s sake, I had a headache. They heard men laughing about the job, debating where to hide the loot, bickering about whose fault it was that things nearly went wrong. Perkins was arrested alongside Collins and Jones after they were caught dropping off a holdall containing some of the loot. Dropping off a holdall with stolen goods inside it, all under police surveillance, while their cars were bugged, as one detective put it. They were analog criminals operating in a digital age. They were extraordinary planners in the physical domain, patient, methodical, experienced. But the digital infrastructure of modern London CCTV everywhere, congestion charge cameras, Mobile phone triangulation was a world they didn't fully reckon with. Their forensic precautions inside the vault were impeccable. But the moment they drove away in a distinctive personal vehicle, they were already compromised. Metropolitan Police Service Commander Peter Spindler publicly apologized for failing to check the alarm when it went off. At least someone apologized. The trial and sentencing. The trial at Woolwich Crown Court was a gift to every crime journalist in Britain. The details that came out were extraordinary. The pub meetings, the birthday timing, the wheelie bins, Collins asleep in the van, the Forensics for Dummies book, Perkins' pension dreams. The men identified as the ringleaders Brian Reeder, Terry Perkins, John Kenny Collins, and Daniel Jones all pleaded guilty before the case went to trial. On the 9th of March 2016, the sentences were handed down. Collins, Jones, and Perkins were each given a 7-year prison term. Carl Wood was sentenced to 6 years. William Lincoln was given a 7-year sentence. Hugh Doyle was jailed for 21 months, suspended for 2 years. Brian Reeder was sentenced to 6 years and 3 months on the 21st of March 2016. The gang members thanked the judge when he sentenced them to only 6 and 7 years each. They thanked the judge at their sentencing for the largest burglary in English legal history. The detective superintendent who led the investigation did not share the public's affection for the gang, he said. They were career criminals. They were callous. They had no consideration for those victims of crime whatsoever. I'd ask members of the public to look past their actual age. They were well-schooled individuals in relation to criminal activity, and members of the public should look past the glamorization of this crime. The confiscation orders. The prison sentences were only the beginning of the legal nightmare for the gang because the courts wanted their money back. In January 2018, confiscation orders were imposed on the ringleaders at Woolwich Crown Court. The orders were staggering in scale. Collins faced a repayment order of £7.6 million. Jones faced over £6.5 million. Reeder faced £6.5 million. The court made clear, pay up or serve additional years. On the 14th of August 2018, Daniel Jones had his sentence extended by 6 years and 287 days for failing to return £6,599,021. On the 1st of August 2019, Collins was sentenced to an additional 2,309 days over 6 years for failing to comply with the confiscation order. It was revealed during the hearing Collins had repaid £732,000 of the £7.6 million order. Collins' £175,000 flat on the Costa del Sol in Spain was seized by police, who also froze nearly £700,000 in his bank accounts. On the 1st of October 2020, Michael Seed was ordered to repay £6 million in damages or face an additional 7 years in prison. In 2022, he was handed an additional 6.5 years for not paying back the confiscation order. The money, it seemed, was gone. It's dispersed, hidden, converted. Nearly £10 million in stolen goods remains unaccounted for to this day. And rather than face the consequences, these men chose to serve more prison time than reveal where it was. Think about that. These men, elderly, sick, in their 70s, chose prison over giving back the money. The loot, wherever it is, meant more to them than their freedom. The aftermath, deaths, and freedom. The years after the trial left a trail of grim consequences. Terry Perkins, the birthday robber, the Security Express veteran, the man who drilled through a vault wall twice in his criminal career, died in HMP, El Marsh in February 2018. He was 69 years old. He never paid back a penny of the confiscation order. He never revealed where his share of the loot was hidden. He went to his grave with that secret. Brian Reeder was released in July 2018 after serving just over 3 years. Having suffered from prostate cancer and a series of strokes, his poor health shielded him from the additional sentence he faced for failing to pay his £6.5 million confiscation order. In April 2023, it was revealed that Reeder had sold 3 of his estates for £2.5 million. And on April 23, 2024, it was revealed that he had passed away aged 84. The governor was gone. His secrets went with him. Danny Jones is now a free man. Having completed his jail time in early 2022, he served his 7 years for Hatton Garden, plus additional time for a separate Mayfair jewellery raid in 2018. He walked out of HMP, Halsley Bay in Suffolk, and was spotted strolling near his home in Enfield. The millions mostly gone, the sentences served, the diamonds who knows where. Michael Basil. His 2022 additional sentence means he faces one of the longest total custodial consequences of anyone in the gang. Despite being the last caught and the most evasive, the company itself, Hatton Garden's safe deposit, was forced to close after trade dropped off in the wake of the high-profile theft. The business that had added the treasures of London's jewellery district since the 1940s simply ceased to exist. It couldn't survive the reputational damage, the cultural explosion. The public's reaction to the heist was, to put it charitably, complicated. Much of the early coverage was affectionate. No one had been hurt or threatened. It was a commercial premises, not a private house. Some of the people who had lost their diamonds and gold in the hall tried to explain that they kept their goods there purely for safe keeping and not to hide them from tax authorities, ex-wives, or the police, and that last detail was noted by the press with something approaching amusement. The safe deposit facility attracted not just honest traders, but also people who had their own reasons for keeping assets away from official attention. Not all victims were entirely sympathetic cases, but the broader public fell in love with the image of elderly men doing one last impossible job. It was cinematic. It was romantic. It was somehow very British. The films came quickly. The 2018 film King of Thieves starred Michael Caine, Tom Courtenay, Jim Broadbent, Michael Gambon, Paul Whitehouse, and Ray Winstone. An ITV 4-part drama aired 2 strong ratings. Documentaries, podcasts, and radio plays followed. The Hatton Garden heist became a permanent fixture of British criminal mythology, right up there with the Great Train Robbery of 1963. And then there was this unexpected footnote. Some local jewelers in Hatton Garden reported an inadvertent boost in their business following the heist. The media coverage and subsequent cultural representations, such as films and documentaries, drew more visitors and potential customers to Hatton Garden, ironically benefiting the businesses in the vicinity. The most famous robbery in Hatton Garden's history ultimately became a tourist attraction. Visitors came to see the building, to walk the streets, to find the pub where the planning meetings happened. The crime that devastated a community also, in a strange way, put that community on the global map. The heist prompted a significant reevaluation of security protocols in safe deposit facilities. Not just in Hatton Garden, but across the UK, exposing vulnerabilities in supposedly secure storage options. Every security company in the country reviewed their procedures. The question of what happens when an alarm sounds on a bank holiday weekend was asked loudly in every boardroom and every police briefing room. The answer, apparently obvious, but somehow not implemented, was, someone goes and checks.
I'm missing millions.
The final mystery. According to official sources, the total stolen had an estimated value of up to £14 million, equivalent to £20 million in 2023, of which only £4.3 million has been recovered. Nearly £10 million gone. The loot was reportedly stashed in wheelie bins initially, then moved through a series of handoffs and hiding places. Some was found in Collins bins. Some was recovered from a cemetery by Jones, though only a fraction of what was there. Some was traced through pawnbrokers and dealers. But the bulk of it? Diamonds don't decompose. Gold doesn't rust. Sapphires don't decay. Somewhere in London, or perhaps further afield, millions of pounds in precious stones and metals are sitting in a lockup. A back garden, a hollowed-out wall, possibly in multiple locations, possibly divided between people who have never been charged with anything. The gang members who knew where it was are either dead, still serving time, or simply not talking. Every confiscation hearing has reached the same wall: silence. Additional prison sentences have been handed out as punishment, and still, silence. It is the great unresolved question of the entire story. Who has it? Where is it? Will it ever surface? What does it all mean? Detective Superintendent Craig Turner, who led the flying squad investigation, asked the public to look past the glamorization of the crime and think of the victims. He was right to do so. The people who lost uninsured heirlooms, whose livelihoods were destroyed, whose most precious possessions were scattered across a debris-covered floor, they are the real story, not the folk heroism of old men playing at one last caper. And yet, you cannot tell this story without marveling at the sheer human drama of it. A group of men, Brian Reeder on the bus, with someone else's Oyster card. Terry Perkins drilling through concrete on his 67th birthday. Kenny Collins asleep in the van. Danny Jones with his forensics for dummies, planned for 3 years. Executed a near-perfect physical operation, left no forensic trace. Got away clean, and then got undone by a distinctive car, a congestion charge camera, and their own inability to stop talking about it in bugged vehicles. They were analog criminals operating in a digital age. That single sentence captures everything. A world that had shaped these men, the pubs, the handshakes, the word of mouth, criminal networks, the physical skill and daring of the old East End London underworld, had been replaced by one in which every vehicle movement is logged. Every mobile phone is traceable, and 150 CCTV cameras watch a single London street. They were brilliant in their way, and they were completely, fatally out of time. Brian Reeder, dead at 84, secrets intact. Terry Perkins, dead in Belmarsh, £6.5 million unaccounted for. Danny Jones, free walking in Enfield, the fez in dressing gown, waiting at home. Basil convicted, sentenced, fighting confiscation orders in court. And somewhere beneath a patio, behind a wall, or inside a rusting lockup in North London, millions of pounds worth of diamonds, sapphires, and gold, waiting for someone to find them. The Hatton Garden safe deposit heist, the largest burglary in English legal history, planned in a pub, executed with wheelie bins, undone by a congestion charge camera, and the loot, still out there. If this found you, drop a like. Subscribe for more stories like this, and tell me in the comments where you think the missing £10 million is hiding. I'll be reading every one. Subscribe for this and many more stories.